And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us, and one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it, and that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon. Tonight we're joined by my guest, Julia. Thanks for coming on here and talking with me.
Yeah, thank you.
Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So my name's Julia, and I live out here on the far edge of anywhere where internet or cell phone works, and there's reason why I live out here in the boonies. I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, I'm an off-grid homesteader. I have goats and gardens, and living in a camper right now, but I'm building an underground house. And we do a lot of building with salvage materials. I'm building a greenhouse out of windows I got for free. And we do a lot with pallets. And I just try to, so kind of like a scavenger, former dumpster diving. I used to do a lot of edible plants and small game trapping. And it just was really trying to live off the land. And actually that leads me into the topic of discussion. So I was living out in a cave in Moab, Utah area in 2011, and I was just doing it for fun to try to survive off the land. I was really into edible wild plants was my main thing. And what happened was I found out that I'm what's called electrosensitive, EMF sensitive. I never really quite felt right in cities. I grew up on the East Coast. But I thought it was just that I was uncomfortable. I thought it was just the overwhelming, madness of city life. But what happened was I moved out to the boonies and my cell phone didn't work out there. So I turned it off. And then I'd come into town every few days. And of course, that the first thing I would do would be turn on the cell phone and make calls to meet up with friends and schedule work. I did a little painting and landscaping on the side. And what I found was I started getting a horrible, massive splitting headache every time I turn on the phone. And at first I thought it was psychological and maybe I was just stressed or something. I didn't think that this could happen. And it turned into, it would be so obvious. I'd get a burning sensation going up my arm that turned into a pressure headache pretty much immediately. And this got worse over the years to the point where I was living in the caves, not just for shits and giggles, but to because I couldn't handle being in town for more than a couple hours at a time. And I still kind of had a social life, actually, because it was in an area where there were a lot of desert parties and people kind of living off grid in the desert. So still have really good friends there to this day, actually. But yeah, I learned that people become electrosensitive, and it's we don't even like the term electrosensitive. I've been saying electrically intolerant, but the official term, and it's also been called electromagnetic radiation syndrome. Officially, it's called hypersensitive. You may have heard about us on shows like Better Call Saul, but that's all fake. It's not really like that. It's just we're average people who have developed an intolerance to artificial radiation. And normally it's cell phones, but it can also happen it tends to get worse over time. And at some point, I developed an allergy even to household AC 60 hertz power. So and it was literally overnight. I had a bad experience I was at the hospital just getting random blood work to try to figure out. I had a health condition with my stomach. I was trying to figure out, but I was just there at the hospital, and I just went into seizure. I got a headache from all the radiation that was there, but it just went into a seizure, and I was never. The next day, I wasn't the same. I couldn't. I tried to go into the house, and I couldn't. I would just my whole body would. I was just in pain over my whole body, kind of fibromyalgic, like like nerve pains, and immediate pressure headache that would turn into a migraine. Even going into a house or around any kind of electric fields. And this really didn't have much correlation with anxiety. Because I trained my mind to be really calm when it's happening, because if you're freaking out, it doesn't help. And like if you're doing your shopping and you're having a panic attack, it doesn't help you get out of there quicker. So I learned how to really focus, and I can kind of be around that and manage just fine. But when I get home, I feel like total hell for the next day, just pressure, headache, and all these nasty symptoms. But when I was out in the field street in low EMF areas in the just outside of town, and we're kind of in canyon country out here, so there's a lot of places to get away from it still. And I feel fine. I'm 43. I have no real health problems at all. And I work all day on the farm. But I go into town, I'm a complete mess. I'm lucky if I can figure out how to swipe the card at the register at the grocery store. But thankfully, I don't need to go to town much anymore. And so listeners might be wondering, so how do you communicate? And for years, I really didn't. I was very isolated and just had to, like I was literally living under a rock. And I was trying to figure this all out as far as the science behind it, because I knew there had to be some biological rather than psychological explanation for this. But, I failed out of college physics because I wasn't paying attention. I really had no idea about the difference between ionizing and non-ionizing radiation, or really anything about it. I just thought it was woo-woo. There was a point at which I thought maybe I was crazy, and I climbed the cell tower, which is the dumbest thing I've ever done. But my friends told me you need to learn how to face your fears, so I climbed the cell tower, thinking maybe I could just defeat it with my mind. And anyway, that was really stupid. I felt sick for about a week, and then I really kind of realized, okay, there's something biological going on. And I just committed myself to understanding what it was, because at the time I thought I could cure it. I was an herbalist also. And I was like, there's got to be some kind of herb or supplement I can take to fix this. So eventually I got in a situation where I could listen to podcasts and download them and listen to them offline. Fairly safely. So I just got really deep into cell biology and genetics and epigenetics and Chinese herbalism and all these different things to try to figure out the answer. And the conclusion I came to was you just have to get away from the fields, and that's the solution. And then in the meantime, there's a few herbs and things you can do to mitigate the effects, but there's no magic cure. There's no shielding or woo-woo devices you can put on your cell phone, or all that snake oil. Like, don't even bother with it. And there are certain shielding things you can do that'll help, but not tinfoil. What really works is rock and sand. So that's why I'm building the underground house. But anyway, yeah, I ended up writing a book about this whole experience called Under a Rock, an Electrosensitive Survival Guide by Julia Lupine. And then I wrote a couple sequels, Your Cell Phone is Not Safe, and Electrocensorship, go more into the science and politics of the whole idea, just because there is so much misinformation on this topic that on both sides of the issue. So I just thought I needed to educate people first, just to tell the really good story, and then educate people on the actual issues and the science behind it so they'd understand. And yeah, sorry, that's all a little long-winded, but anyway.
So
where should hear him?
I was gonna say, like, so you've done the research of this, you've been affected by this, and I guess for the listener out there, how has this affected you with your life? I know you said you were living out in a cave. Like, there's a whole lot to unwrap in this thing. So, from the like, what led you to be living out where you were living, like with the whole cave setup and everything? Like, was that just something that
Yeah,
you wanted to do, like living off the grid?
basically, like yeah, like ever since I was a kid, I read stories about survival and about kids living out in the. I had this dream of running away and living in the woods, and I decided to actually go and do it. But there was some backstory. So I was actually going into wildlife biology. That was what I decided on as a career after, dreaming about living in the woods as a kid. So I had a couple of jobs, but I failed out of college because I actually think it might have had to do with all the with electromagnetism, because it was the same symptoms. I was a straight A kid in high school, but then all of a sudden in the late 90s when the towers went up, and I had no idea about any of this, but all of a sudden I couldn't concentrate and I'd get these dizzy spells and disorientation. I couldn't drive across town without getting lost. And this started to affect my schoolwork. So I basically almost dropped out of high school, barely passed, but college was a total failure. But I ended anyway. I didn't give up. I just decided to get some internships and gain some life experience. So I was very ironically doing radio telemetry on animals. I had this job studying California condors. So I had they all have radio tags on them. So I had this big antenna, and I was all day long waving the antenna around, searching for signals on these birds and taking bearings. And then this is the really funny part, but what part of the job was to the largest cell tower array in Southern California, or one of the ITT communications facility. The California condors would fly over there and land on the cell towers and start messing with them. And the people at the plant didn't like that. So one of my jobs was to go over and chase condors off of the cell towers and just run at them and scream. We had a special key to get in the gate. And if I couldn't get them to leave before sundown, I'd spend the night. So I would just sleep next to probably an array of 100 cell towers. And I never really felt too good after this, but I still had no idea that could cause biological effects. This is when I was 21. So that may have had something to do with, becoming electrosensitive later. But anyway, I went on after this job and had a series of random jobs in different areas of the country, and just kind of trying to figure out what to do for a career. And I eventually decided I wanted to be a nature writer. And part of my thesis of what I wanted to write about was the hunter-gatherer mindset, but for modern times. So I was teaching myself how to forage dandelions and trap squirrels and rabbits. And so when I ended up in Moab, Utah, there were all these caves, and it was just a really easy place for me to survive. I would sleep in the desert and hang out and eat wild plants, and then go into town and party with my friends on the weekends, and maybe work for a couple days a month, maybe on average, picking tumbleweeds, because people always needed yard work done. So I just make my money and buy bags of rice and beans and stash them in the desert, and eat a lot of wild edible plants and pick fruit off trees, a dumpster dive. It was a pretty easy life, actually, at the time, until I became electrosensitive. And then it became hell. And I was just living in the caves, trying to survive and barely able to go into town, kind of off and on like this for years. And I had various campsites I would travel around to. And after a while, people did start to question my sanity, because was going through some health problems at the time, and they thought I was just going crazy, I guess, because I'd asked them to turn their cell phone off around me. And I didn't have the scientific backing at the time, because when something like this is happening to you, you can't just go and look it up on Google if you can't use a computer.
Right.
So, so that was the really tough part.
Now, with all the research and everything you've done when it comes to this stuff, is this something that, and I don't want to sound like conspiratorial here, but this is kind of the way the show goes. Is this something you think people like are doing intentionally, or is this just something that affects certain people like you?
Yeah, well, there's sort of two questions, but yeah, it's throughout as far as it affecting certain people throughout the history of electricity, there's always been a small subset, probably from 3 to 10% of the population, who is much more affected than others. Like they would give people electric shocks back in the day, just because probably, I don't know, people were bored back then, I guess. So they would line up to get an electric shock at the fair. And they found that some people, like no matter how small the dosage of current, they would have a bad reaction. And then other people, no matter how much electricity was used, they would barely feel it. So there's definitely a very wide range of how people are affected by it. Now, as far as the second question, are they trying to kill us all or dumb us down, or is there a nefarious purpose behind it? I'm definitely not ruling it out. There might be, but where I've gone with my research is I've decided that there's so much in the mainstream that I can more easily prove, that I don't even need to go deep. There's just obvious instances of people lying, and it's basically all politicized. It's like big tobacco times 1,000, because they have more sophisticated propaganda and even more money. Pretty much, so just all the scientific studies that are done are almost all funded by telecom money. And if there's enough money behind something, you can get any results you want with a study, or manipulate. They say, what's that quote about lies, damn lies, and statistics? It's like that. And so for my newest book, Electrocensorship, I started, and Your Cell Phone is Not Safe. It's kind of a duo of books. Cell phone is more about the cancer, and electrocensorship is about electrosensitive people and how we've been portrayed to look crazy, but really it's just all the politics. There's all these fake studies where they zap people with frequencies, and then they try to say that it's just a placebo. So I actually looked at these studies and read them in detail, and there's a major problem. And I'm not a scientist, but I have enough scientific backing that it was pretty obvious to me that there's deep problems and flaws with the study's methodology. So yeah, it's like there may be some deeper reason, but the only reason that I really have felt the need to tell people, to convince them that we're not crazy, is it's about money. It's just like these companies make so much money and they don't even want to lose any amount of their profits, so they're going to manipulate the science to get any results that they want. And the FCC and ICNIRP, International Committee on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, these agencies are all stacked with industry people, and I've looked them up and I traced back where they worked before, and the FCC heads, like, they all worked for big tech. Some of them were big tech lawyers, or they were up there in communication companies, and then they get a job with the FCC, and then they go back to working with big tech right after. So obviously there's conflict of interest, and these are the groups that set the safety standards. And there are safety standards on non-ionizing radiation, but it's kind of like setting setting the speed limit at 500 miles per hour. It's ridiculous. There's no health effects taken into consideration at all. And you cannot sue. They're pretty much bulletproof as trying to sue a company.
Right.
People are trying, but yeah, they've got lawyers.
I just wonder, like, if they do things like this and they know it affects people a certain way, it does seem nefarious that they would do this. And like the ultimate end game, it doesn't clearly affect me. It doesn't affect a majority of the people. So it's like, it's almost like it's a side effect of something else. And for some reason it may affect you, but it may not affect a lot of other people, because you're one of the few people that I've heard that had any sort of issues, like with some of the, I don't know if it's electromagnetism or stuff, but even people have talked about some of the stuff with like the signals they get from cell phones and everything, of how the signals themselves have an effect on them. Which,
yeah,
you'd mentioned something before. Is a cell phone something that you try to avoid because of the signals from it, of how it affects you?
It completely debilitates me. And it's like, at first I thought it was in my head, but within the first year, I realized how obvious it was. It's probably as strong as my sense of smell, really. It just knocks me out with a pressure headache. But so yeah, I avoid it. And it's like, I have an EMF meter, but I don't really need it because I can just usually tell. But I have it anyway to double check myself. And where I live, it's 0.0001 microwatts per square meter of RF, and that's almost nothing. It's and that's pretty much unheard of. I go to town and the meter's off the charts, like thousands of times that. So it's like, so I kind of think a lot of people can feel it, but they just don't get the contrast. It's like, this only happened to me because I was living in the caves, and I'd go from zero radiation to putting my personal microwave antenna to my head, my cell phone, and making a call. And it just became so super obvious. But over the years, I've met people who once I pointed it out, they, like, for example, my boyfriend, he's not EMF sensitive, so-called electrosensitive at all, but he did notice, like, he was, for a while he would go, but so my Wi-Fi router's in its own and I want to get fiber optic landline. That's really the solution, is to get a landline and not do anything wirelessly. But unfortunately, that's not an option right now in my area. So my Wi-Fi is in its own camper. It's on a 300-foot cord that connects to my computer. And the camper where it is, it's behind a dirt berm, like far away. So there's no signal that even reaches here. But anyway, my boyfriend, for a while, he would go in that camper while it was on and sit there and use his phone, and just to get out of the heat and the flies, because it's kind of nice in there. But he said he started noticing he'd get a headache, so he stopped doing that as much. And other people, like my friend who I've been hiking with recently, she said that she and her daughter both noticed that when they stood next to their smart meter, they could hear it, which I've heard of before. Sometimes people hear a high-pitched ringing from microwave radiation. And a few other cases like that. I found of people, once they start thinking about it, they realize they do feel different in different areas. But as far as people who are severely affected, that's a small percentage of the population. And I think that it's usually misdiagnosed as something else, because if I didn't know what was causing this and I was still living on the East Coast immersed in these signals, I would just think I was going crazy, or that I had fibromyalgia, or I'm sure I would have developed some degenerative autoimmune disease at this point, because I was sick when I was living in it. I was starting to I thought I had Lyme, but I got all these tests and they were all negative. And then what really made it clear what it actually was is that all the symptoms go away as soon as I come out here, and they reappear as soon as I go back into town. And I've done this back and forth probably thousands of times, because it's been going on the past 15 years. So with me, it's super obvious, but I think there's a lot of people who have a lower degree of sensitivity than me, but who are still really affected and are mostly just misdiagnosed, or a lot of people are on pills too. I'm one of the few, I looked up the percentages. I think it was something like over half of Americans are on some medication, and that dulls your senses, or they're alcoholics or whatever substances they use. And beyond a little coffee, I don't do anything like that. So, and by the way, coffee numbs it too, which is why I drink it. I have to be around signals, but for the most part, people are just numbing their senses. And then if they do start to feel anything, they might not talk about it because the reception you get from people is really bad generally.
Does this affect you if you're in a vehicle too?
Oh, totally. The one vehicle I've been good with is I have a 1985 Toyota Tercel, and it's wonderful, and I don't really feel anything from it at all because it's about as primitive as it can get. It's actually the same make and model of car I learned how to drive on back in the day. But I knew I would never get into a Tesla. But even a little, my boyfriend and I bought a little Subaru together, and it's old. It's 2002, and I still feel a difference in magnetic fields between that and my Toyota Tercel, but it's tolerable. But a lot of cars, especially ones that are more electronic, they definitely give me a headache, and I won't get in rental cars. And my parents visit me, and they have a rental, and unfortunately, there's no way to turn off that. I guess they have tracking devices, and there's just no way I can ride with them. I get immediately sick, nauseated, dizzy. I pretty much can't drive. So I've driven all over the country when I was younger, and didn't really have any fear of new experiences. And I've been everywhere. I used to hitchhike before all this happened too. And luckily, I always tell people, go see the world when you're young, because you really never know what's going to happen. I'll probably never leave my little valley again if I can help it. But I don't even mind. I like being out in nature. But anyway, last experiences out on the road were hell. Like, I started almost having seizures, and it was pretty much I wasn't safe to drive. I was driving through New Hampshire at one point, thinking I could still go on a road trip. Back in the day when things were starting to get worse, I was visiting my family, and I was on this road trip, and got into Keene, New Hampshire, and there was this giant cell tower, and lots of cell towers actually. And I got to the point where my vision was whiting out, and I was definitely not safe to drive. So I just had to look for woods and drive as far out of town as I could, and just pull over on some random people's property and lay down. And you definitely want to lay down on the ground when this happens, that's for sure. But I just laid down on the ground and went to sleep and felt fine in the morning, or felt okay anyway, and drove home. And this has happened one or two other times on road trips. It's a really bad feeling when that happens when you're driving, because you have to keep driving to get out of the environment, but that's not safe, and you can crash your car. So mostly I just stay home these days, and it's all right, because I have a farm. I was able to get property in 2020, which is a whole great story in itself. But I went from backpacking, living in the caves, and going through this health crisis to being a landowner, which is awesome. So I'm out there pounding fence posts and chasing goats, and trying to get my garden. And anyway, so I'm pretty busy with that, so I don't really care about the rest of the world right now, beyond reaching out to podcasts and trying to promote my books, but I've been also really focusing on these days.
Now with the book, how has it been for you since you've written it? How long has it been out?
So Under a Rock has been out since 2023.
Okay.
And So I've been promoting it on podcasts and getting some sales. Electrosensitive people do go online, so I joined a couple Facebook groups and promoted it through there. But I'm just trying to get a wider audience. And then the other two have been, let's see, Your Cell Phone Is Not Safe. I wrote in 2024, and then Electrocensorship. I just finished up with it last winter, and I'm starting another one. The title's a secret right now, but anyway, that one I'm trying to look for. Trying to maybe go a little bigger with that one, and it's about homesteading, like homesteading with a focus on people with environmental and chemical, because the chemical sensitivity sometimes overlaps. So it's a focus on how to be an off-grid homesteader when you have electrical or chemical issues. But also if you don't, I'm trying to be mainstream because there's a lot less that we really need to be comfortable and happy. Like I live in this camper and I don't have running water most of the time, but I've got more leisure time and probably a much better life than I used to when I was in the cities. And it's like I just want to share all these things that I've learned, how to build with pallets and how to garden and raise goats and eat wild plants. So that's what this.
I was going to ask, like, now during the winter and stuff, what do you use to keep warm? Like, do you have a way to set up like burn for like wood or something?
Yeah, I've got a wood burn. It's actually right next to where the computer is sitting right now. But yeah, I got a little wood burner in my camper. My neighbor helped me. He cut a hole through the camper and just put the pipe out the top. So, we just cut up. My boyfriend cuts it up with a chainsaw. But before I was with him, I'm a little bit afraid of the chainsaw. So I have just a little reciprocating sawzall that's battery powered. And I just go out and cut wood with that. And before I had that, I used a handsaw. Stay really warm and comfortable. I actually love the winters here because the bugs go away, and it gets really, really cold, but the winters are pretty mild.
So I think I can agree with the fact that I don't enjoy the bugs here. It's already I live in Indiana and the weather's bipolar. So tomorrow it's supposed to be 83, but then on the next day it's going to be a low of 30. So it doesn't want to make up its mind if it wants to be cold or hot.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of been like that here. It's supposed to be 23 tomorrow night, which is going to suck. We're going to have to cover all the plants because I planted my garden 2 months ago. But it's still to me better than the heat. It gets to be 115 on an average day, and there's flies everywhere. So I really hate that part of the summer.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine the extreme heat. When it gets over 90 here with our humidity, it's terrible.
It is kind of worse. Where I spent a lot of time in Bloomington as a kid, and it is really humid, and at least we don't have that.
I've been out west before, and it was 114 degrees. I think it was the day that I left, and they said, "Oh, it's not that hot. It's a dry heat." I was like, "It's still hot." I don't care if it's a dry heat; it's still hot to me.
Yeah. What's worse than the heat to me is the flies, though. Like, I hate them. So I guess of all the things I've survived, of everything, I've always said that's the thing that's going to drive me nuts because we're in cattle country, and I clean the goat pen all the time, but we're in cattle country, so it's impossible to get away from them. There'll be thousands, and it's so disgusting that you almost lose it. But really going to war against them this year, I've got these heavy-duty fly traps, and I'm just going to buy massive amounts of fly paper and put it all over the ceiling, and hopefully that'll help. It keeps out the tourists. That's the thing.
Yeah. How many goats do you have right now?
I've got 4,
okay.
And which is a reasonable number. I had 8 last year, and I was trying to find homes for the babies. And I've had up to 12 or 14 at a time, which is insane. But these ones I have now are really good. So I have 3 milk goats and 1 pat goat, Cheeto, who is trained. He's 4 years old, and he's like a big puppy. He rides in the car with me, and I put a backpack on him. We haven't actually gone really for a backpacking overnight trip. We mostly just go on day hikes. But yeah, I love goats. The milk saved my life. I was going through some health issues, kind of sort of an unrelated issue, but it turned out to be my gallbladder. But because I was electrosensitive, I had such bad experiences at the hospital that I wasn't able to go to get it treated until I was having gallbladder attacks, and it almost killed me. So I finally went to the hospital and just took all my herbal tinctures at once and got through the EMF situation. And anyway, just ended up fixing my gallbladder with herbs and diet. But one of the foods that helped, so I'd lost massive amounts of weight at the time. And one of the things that helped me the most was raw goat milk. And so I try to remember that when they're running around my yard and destroying my trees, just that I owe that, that they saved my life. So I should probably be nice to them. And so I make goat cheese and yogurt. And my boyfriend puts the goat cheese in the smoker with different flavors of smoke, and it's just all really super good gourmet.
I have 2 goats. We ended up having baby goats right after we moved in here, and we didn't realize that they were pregnant because they were 2 females. But I didn't realize that we were cutting down a fern tree bush thing out in front of our house, and I threw it out back. Well, they ate off of it, and apparently that is toxic to goats. So 3 of them sadly passed away a couple of years ago. So we're back down to 2 goats.
What kind of goats?
One is half boar goat. I can tell
Okay.
And then I'm not sure what the other version is. She's kind of black and white, like checkered black and white. The other one looks just like a boar goat, like all white except for her face.
Okay.
She's got some brown on it, and she's a lot bigger than the other one.
Yeah, I have Toggenburgs, and they're pretty good. Like they don't have horribly loud voices like the Nubians, and they're not as much trouble as the Alpines. They're kind of a good, well-rounded goat, and they're good milk goats too.
So mine they're more or less for eating grass. That was we don't milk them or anything like that.
They are good. Yeah.
Well.
And yeah, the boar is really known as a milk breed so much. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the goats. They're fun.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely underrated. I can see why people don't want them because they're a lot of trouble. But I finally got my place pretty goat-proofed. And we got a good routine. I just let them out, and they circle my fence, and they eat, and then they come home, and they get their pellets. So yeah, it's been fun. And then the boy, he rides in the car, and we go for hikes down at the river.
Well, we've been going on for almost 40 minutes, and I kind of want to go back to talk about your books. Like, where can everyone find them at?
Unfortunately, they're only on Amazon at this time. But yeah, look up Julia Lupine, like the flower. And and they're on Amazon. They're called, the titles, again, are Under a Rock, an electrosensitive survival guide is the subtitle. And then Your Cell Phone is Not Safe, and electrocensorship. And I have a couple other ones I have about other topics. But anyway, those are the 3 main ones on EMF. And then I also have a Substack, which is at Julia Lupine. And I post articles on different things, like either on EMF or goats or homesteading or whatever I feel like talking about at the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I tell you what, if you're able to send me the links, I will put all those into the show notes for anyone listening. So if they're interested, they can click on the links inside the notes, and it'll take it right to your books or to your Substack.
Yeah, that would be great.
Is there anything else before we wrap this up that you would like to discuss with me and any information for the listeners out there that could be curious?
Yeah, let me think. I guess I'd say, like, to people who might be skeptical, I'd say do your own research. Don't take anybody's opinion at face value, because there is a lot of disinformation in this field. So what I did was I just started doing the research and reading the papers and just really checking, um, not taking anything at face value. I just had to, because I knew what I felt and that was obvious, but um, I had to back it up with facts. And I feel like I was pretty successful at that. And yeah, and then other than that, I would tell people if they suspect that this might be an issue in their life, what they should do. The best way to find out would be go camping. Don't bring your electronics, and that may even include your car. So just don't even turn your car on, and, and make sure that you can't get a signal wherever you're camping. So places with a lot of terrain are good, and just um, see how you feel after a few days of that, and then go home and go on your devices and see if there's a difference. And that's one way of telling if that's an issue. And then also, there's ways that people can reduce, even as a preventatory measure. There's ways that people can reduce your exposure, like put it on air. Because remember, what a cell phone is, it's a two-way microwave antenna.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same 5 gigahertz frequency as a microwave, but or a cell phone might be a little different. The Wi-Fi is the same as the 2.5 gigahertz, 2.45 gigahertz, and the cell phone, it's different depending on the carrier. You probably know all this, but but anyway, it's all in the millimeter waves, which is the microwave part of the spectrum. And nobody's ever been able to prove that this is safe. So basically, it's like putting a microwave next to your head, but at a lot lower power. And over time, this can be cumulative and cause problems, whether or not you feel it. I go into it in the book, but there's been a large spike in brain tumors usually on the right side of the head, or whatever side that the person holds the phone. So, it's probably a good idea to minimize exposure if you can. So there's a lot of things you can do, like put it on speakerphone or put it on airplane mode. Also turn the Wi-Fi off at night. You can even have it on a timer switch so it automatically goes off at night. And just all these things you can do that it's not really a cure or a fix, but it's something that a person can do now that won't really disrupt their daily routine. And there's no downside to a little prevention. So anyway, I suppose that about wraps it up, unless you have any more questions.
No, I think we kind of covered everything. The only other thing that I could think of is when you're living off the grid, what is the one thing that what has been the hardest thing for you trying to avoid all of this, like living off the grid and everything? What is the one thing, if some people were interested of trying to go that route of a lifestyle, what is one of the things you recommend for them?
I guess just learn how to do dishes and clean yourself without running water. It's like if you master that skill, then you can live anywhere.
Right.
And it's not really. It's mostly just the fear of a little dirt and what people will think if your hair is a little messy. It's like I'm not a Paul Bunyan type, and not really even that tough, but anyone can do it, is what I mean, if you really want to.
Well, Julia, it's been a pleasure talking with you, but we're going to wrap this one up. So again, before we do, would you let the audience know the name of your books and they can find them on Amazon?
Yep. Under a Rock, Your Cell Phone is Not Safe, and Electro Censorship by Julia Lupine on Amazon. And Yeah, definitely check them out. I can tell you it's going to be very different and probably much more entertaining than any other EMF related book that you'll ever read.
Well, I'm definitely curious about them, so I'm probably going to get on my, are they on the Kindle version or are they just paperback?
I think that the first two are Kindle and paperback, and then electrocensorship. So eventually I might get it on Kindle, but right now it's just paperback.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, again, I appreciate you coming on here tonight and sharing that with me and the audience, and hopefully anyone out there listening, they go and check out your books, and if they're suffering from something that they think may be like this, hopefully this helps them out.
Yeah, and definitely don't climb a cell tower to try to figure it out.
No, I don't recommend anyone climbing towers anyways. I have a fear of heights, so I recommend everyone to stay on the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, you have
Anyway,
a great night.
Yeah. Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.
If you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, or you can also go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Just make sure to reach out and get a hold of me, and we will get something scheduled for a future episode. You can also find Tinfoil Tales on Facebook and Instagram. Just look for Tinfoil Tales Podcast. You can reach out to me that way too. Remember to share the show around. Word of mouth is the best way to help the show grow. And just remember, truth comes at cost. Are you willing to pay the price?